first of all, I just want to say thank you guys for being here. And also thanks, Jeanette, for being here. I'm super, super pleased to present her. Jeanette is actually internationally hailed as like one of the most innovative illusionists today. Jeanette has staged hundreds of sold out and standing room only performances, including commissioned performances for the Museum of Contemporary Art of Chicago, which is fantastic. Also the International Museum of Surgical Science, and Fortune 500 companies. And Jeanette's performances have also been praised by the Chicago Tribune, PBS, New York Times, and I'm just very, very, very pleased to welcome Jeanette. So Jeanette, you can take it away.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Busterin, and I am so delighted that you are all here with me on this lovely Sunday afternoon. So today we are all here for the workshop Designing the Impossible, which is really looking at a lot of the strategies that myself as a magician use and some that are kind of broadly used by magicians in sort of creative problem solving, and then how to use a lot of these things to sort of broaden our horizons in terms of how we approach different sorts of ideas in the world. So right now, what I will do is, since many of us have not been able to encounter each other in the world otherwise, even perhaps this is the first virtual performance of mine that you're seeing, I'll kick off our time together by way of a quick kind of visual introduction of myself and my work. So I'll open it up with a short performance just so you get a taste of a little bit of what my performances look like, or at least what they look like right now on Zoom. So as many of you maybe already know who are a bit familiar with my work, a lot of what I do is based in ideas about sensory perception and how we see things, how we think about things, and where those ideas intersect. So I'll show you a literally small demonstration of this idea using just a couple of rubber bands. So I'll start out by stretching one in between my fingers, just like this, and dropping the second one right down behind it, just like that. So it's on the inside here. But if you just change how you look at them for just a moment, they actually melt right through each other. And I love this as sort of a quick and easy demonstration of how literally flexible our perceptions truly are, which is what we'll be spending a lot of the time today really focusing on and talking about. Before we move too much further, I'll also share one other performance piece with you, which is this. We'll be focusing a lot also on the mental psychology and sort of imagination aspect of things today. So we'll try a short experiment with this as well. Everyone, I'd like you to, just in your mind for now, envision a deck of face-up playing cards spread out in front of you. So just go ahead and imagine those. And now in your mind, I want you to envision yourself reaching out and picking out just one. Really take a look at that card and create a very clear mental image of that card. Now, playing cards, of course, are kind of constituted of several pieces of information, namely the value and the suit. So by value, I mean, is it an ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, or king? And then, of course, with the suit, hearts, diamonds, clubs, or spades. So with what I want you to do first is concentrate on the value of the card that is just in your mind. So think about that. And now, in a moment, I'll be asking everyone to sort of utilize the chat on the side. If using the chat is new to you, you'll notice there should be a button right about where my finger is on the screen. Just tap on that. That will open up a whole screen that is off here to the side. And then in a moment, we'll be opening this up, but I want to make sure when you type in, there is that sort of blue bar right here that is, make sure that in that drop down, it says all panelists and attendees. That's important. Because in a moment, don't do this quite yet, I'll give you a little countdown, but in a moment, I'll be asking you to type in just the value of the card that you have in your mind. And what I'll be doing is to make sure we get sort of an equitable process for doing this is in a moment, whoever gets their answer through first is the one that we're going to go with. So everybody get ready to type the value, just the value, not the suit of the card that you've been envisioning into the chat, and do that please in 3, 2, 1, go for it. Okay, the first one I saw come in, everybody else can stop. Dave was quick on that, was a 10. So my next question will go out to everybody who honestly, Dave C., since you already got your answer in, I'll ask you to kindly sit the next question out because we want to get somebody else involved. But for everybody else, now move on to the suit that you had in mind. Hearts, diamonds, clubs, or spades. That's what we'll move on to now. So hang on 1 second, don't type it in yet. I want to give everybody a heads up here. We're going to do it in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, I saw hearts going first there. Or actually, I apologize. It was diamonds from Georgie. Once we actually did our countdown there. No, I'm sorry, I was right the first time. The first one after I started my countdown was hearts. So basically, together we had this choice of the 10 of hearts being made. Interesting because obviously we tried to keep this as randomized as possible with the images and ideas that have been existing purely within your minds. It's interesting though for a second reason. You probably all have noticed that I have had a deck of cards that is encased in glass behind me that has been here this whole time. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the cover and open this up. Crack it open for the first time. And as we start to spread through all of our cards, we do see that there is one and only one card that is reversed. If we take a look at it, it's their 10 of hearts. So I love this as, again, sort of a magical demonstration of how our thought processes and ideas that exist within the mind meet the physical world and physical objects, which is really what we'll be talking about for the rest of our time together. I do want to give everyone sort of a heads up on how the rest of our time will work. I know that is something that is always very helpful for me. So I will go ahead and begin sharing my screen with you. And here's kind of our layout of our time for today. I will also be very clear in saying, I know the title is Designing the Impossible. It is designing the seemingly impossible. We aren't going to be doing anything too crazy or genuinely breaking any laws of physics, as cool as that would be. But one of my sort of main interests in all of this is I have been wildly lucky. I've been a magician for now over 25 years, and magic at its core utilizes really interesting kind of nonlinear methods of problem solving. And so I think it affords a lot of very out-of-the-box techniques for just how to look at situations, problems, even materials, products, things like that, that can be applied to a lot of different aspects of our lives. So right now we'll kind of get into just a quick what and why of what we're doing today. Then I'll teach everyone a very quick and simple magic effect to demonstrate some of the ideas that we're talking about. Then we'll dissect the how and why of how it works, and then leave time for a Q&A at the end. So before we get too much further, we'll sort of delve into a central question here, which is, what is magic? There's a contemporary philosopher named Jason Leddington who has been studying magic and the philosophy of magic for a number of years. And he sort of has a foundation of ideas built on the idea of magic as presenting a moment that is impossible, yet as far as you can tell, it happened anyway. And ideas that it's creating the illusion of impossibility, which I think is quite interesting. He also notes that one of the interesting things about magic is that you're sort of experiencing the real and the unreal at the same time, which then creates some really distinct and unusual feelings. Because magic itself then is creating both visual and psychological contradictions, a lot of times we're getting information where what we're perceiving in front of us visually really contradicts our psychological knowledge of it. And so we're having this sort of deep-seated, bizarre psychological experience that then, as he kind of further talks about, jumps straight to us having more of an intellectual response and an intellectual processing of something, which is different than what we often see in a lot of other forms of art or performance, which is, kind of fit more neatly into certain aesthetic categories, which is why it's interesting that magic, until somewhat recently, hasn't really been deeply reflected on in some of these ways. So sort of my goals for today's workshop are really to kind of create a little bit more of a sense of transparency, hopefully share some of what I learned on some of these topics, and just foster a sense of dialogue. Because at being a magician, we exist in this sort of inherently covert world. Obviously, I'm functioning within a world of trade secrets and things that I can't explain, but because of that, there's sort of a weird thing that happens, which is that because we have to keep the technical part of what we do secret, there becomes sort of a disconnect in explaining, what makes a piece of magic good, what makes it worth learning, what makes somebody a skilled performer or technician. So for example, for me, I am somebody where, honestly, I have never learned to play an instrument. I don't know how to read music, but I also was fortunate enough to take, a music appreciation class in middle school. So I, sort of, and I think as most people, we have a lot of familiarity with music, and we understand, okay, wow, this person just did this amazing guitar riff, or, I watched a virtual concert from Chicago Symphony last night, and you can watch somebody do, an amazing cello suite or incredible, violin solo. And even as somebody who's not terribly educated in that, I can look at it and go, oh my gosh, these people are masters in their craft and clearly have expert technical skill. Where with magic, it's sort of intrinsic to what we do that almost has to be lacking from the conversation. So right now, I also am hoping that by learning little bits and pieces of magic technique that are ethical for me to teach, that hopefully it sheds a little bit of transparency in terms of just having more of a public education on maybe what is a more interesting, more technically sound piece of magic or magic performance. And again, all tying that thing into how do we use some of this really interesting creative process that underlies magic to apply to our own lives and industries. So in a moment, I'm going to get into teaching the magic effect that we'll work on today. So I also want to address, why am I teaching this particular effect? There is sort of a well-known magic theoretician, he's well-known within magic circles anyway, who has a secret identity. The only thing that we do kind of know is that this person does seem to be male, but notes that there seem to be be three types of effects that seem to be broadly acceptable in terms of being ethical to reveal, which are generic tricks with convolutedly interested methods, mediocre tricks with unique methods, and concepts that people already know about, meaning things that many of us maybe learned as children, things that are in magic kits, etc. So I would venture to say the one that we're going to learn today is probably the first one, a relatively generic effect, at least on its surface. We'll get into why it's actually not that generic, but with sort of a convolutedly interesting method. So we'll be exploring it basically through three different categories, which is looking at sort of the form, the content, and then the variations and implications. So let's go ahead and dive in and learn the effect. I am going to jump back to all of you right now. And so I'll perform this for you first, so you will get to see how it would look when you perform the effect. And then I'll teach it step by step, go through everything, including the download link with those instructions again. And then we'll dive in a little further onto the how and why this works. So you will have to bear with me because I am quarantining alone. So I sometimes you would often be doing this for another person, and you all are my other person right now. So I will show you. Before we started, I grabbed a couple of envelopes that we'll be using that are just small coin envelopes, and then also two small slips of paper, a purple and a green. So I'll be using these will be our materials for the day. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and start with our purple piece of paper, and to sort of mark this, and now it has tumbled to my floor, so hold on a moment. Did not land where I thought it would on my keyboard. So to mark essentially that it will be going in this envelope, I also have a purple label that I will be peeling off and sticking to my envelope here. And we'll make sure that you all can see that going on. I'm just gonna stick that in the corner there. So hopefully you all can see that. And then in will go my purple piece of paper, again into my purple envelope there. Okay, so normally I would seal this for demonstration purposes today. I am not. So purple envelope, and I'm going, I just have a kitchen bowl here. I'm going to go ahead and drop that envelope inside. And then now I have also for our second envelope, I have my green sheet of paper. This will be going inside, and I also will be marking this with a small almost pseudo postage stamp type label that will be going onto my green envelope to mark my green envelope. Hopefully you can see that there. And then placing the green sheet of paper inside. Great. Now, and dropping this one into my bowl as well. Now, one of the amazing things is how we think about color, and our visual perceptions of color are really interesting, but of course the color spectrum is pretty unique and flexible. So we will see if we can actually make a bit of magic happen in terms of how we perceive color. I'll show you what I mean. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and grab one of our envelopes. I'm actually going to go ahead and give them a little bit of a mix up. Okay, and now I'll grab one of the envelopes here. And okay, I grabbed our purple envelope, purple paper. So I'm going to go ahead and actually we'll tear this open. Sorry, hopefully you all can see I keep dropping out of the frame, but if we go ahead and unseal this, you see that inside is actually the green piece of paper. And then let's take a look at our other envelope. Here we have our green envelope. And if we go ahead and tear this open, take a look. We see inside is our purple paper. So this is the effect we'll learn today. This is really, it's again, this is easier to do with a little bit of a different setup and other people, but this is a really interesting effect where the pieces of paper within the envelopes change places and the sort of color transposition. So this effect was originally titled Walking Colors and came from book, I believe, titled 264 like easy magic tricks you can do, which is from the 1950s. And it was just a really tiny little paperback book, but had some really, really clever stuff in it. So I'm going to go ahead and get into how this works and why I picked this particular effect. What I performed was the most basic version of this humanly possible, just because it's something I can quickly run through in about 5 or 10 minutes here. What is important for our conversation today is the principles that are at the foundation of this effect. So I fully understand this has, red or purple and green pieces of paper is very inconsequential. I get it. But this is the base version that I'm teaching, and we'll get into a little further on that in a bit. So here are the supplies that you will need and in a moment, again, I do have a full download link for all of this with the full instructions and the book citation and everything. But I'll show you everything first. So I just grabbed 2 coin envelopes. I'm probably a rare person that has a ton of coin envelopes around. This will work with basically any type of envelope that you have, as long as they are identical. That's all that matters. So I just grabbed a couple of white coin envelopes. It's better if it's not something with like a really distracting pattern on it. I know every now and again, like greeting cards, envelopes have crazy designs on them, but something relatively plain. So I had that. I had my 2 pieces of colored cardstock, and then this is where things get interesting, is I just printed out on some label paper just some essentially just colored stickers. So when you watched it, it appeared that I had 2. In fact, what I actually had was 4. I'll explain further. So what I had was I had done a little bit of setup, and here was my setup. Is before the Zoom today, I took 2 extra stickers, 1 of each, and then I went ahead and I took, for example, so here's one of my green stickers. I went ahead and I placed this just on the corner of 1 envelope. So that's kind of my first setup. And then I took my other envelope, which again is found its way to that it wants to hang out on my floor. I took my other envelope, purple label, peeled that off, and then did the same thing, placing that just on the corner. So now I have, this is my setup, is having basically, 2 envelopes that each has a label in the corner with those colors. Now you're set up, you're ready to go. So then what I did is when I first picked up the envelopes and showed them to you, I just kind of stacked them like this so that they were overlapping, and then just covered over the front facing one with a couple of my fingers, so it looks like they are blank on the front and on the back, and can pretty casually show that. So now it looks like you just have two envelopes that are blank on both sides. And then I kept those on my tabletop. I just placed them face down, and then picked up, I'll start off first with the purple piece of paper. So then what I did is I grabbed my envelope that has the green label on it. So again, I'm showing you the behind the scenes view here. But I grabbed the green label envelope and then and kept this towards me, so it's facing me and away from the audience. And I'll turn a little bit so you can see this sort of behind the scenes view. So so I am showing my imaginary audience of people here, showing them my purple piece of paper and also then my purple label. So I'm saying, okay, now I have, you know, the corresponding one of each, the purple label, the purple paper, and then I went ahead, peeled off my purple label, and then did quite like I did before, just covered over the green, and then placed that onto my envelope. And so now you see that it looks, you know, people feel like the envelopes that they've been shown before are blank. And so now just popping that on the corner and then taking my purple piece of paper and sliding that inside. And then normally I would seal that up. Actually, I have some water right here. I'll go ahead and kind of close that flap with my water. So now you've got this sealed, and essentially that's what you're looking at on the back. So then I took this whole thing and just dropped it into the bowl. I kept it so that the side with, it's a little hard to see, but the side with the larger flap that I just sealed down, I just dropped that in so it was facing towards me, so I kind of know what end is up. So for example, now that when I picked this up, I know that that was the purple one, because that's where I put that label on facing me, because I was putting the labels with the, you know, sort of top on that top end with the sealable flap. So that's in my envelope, and with the flap is this way, but face down. Then I just did the exact same thing, repeated that. Now I'm picking up the envelope that secretly has the purple label on the back, taking the green label, peeling that off, and then when I'm placing this on, I'm covering that label with my fingers so that the audience can't see it, taking that green label, pseudo postage stamping that on in the corner, can show that to everybody, and then same thing, going ahead, placing my green piece of paper inside and closing that up. So, and then same thing, you can, you know, casually show that again. Looks like, you know, green paper and green marked envelope. Did the same thing then of taking that and placing it into my bowl. And then kind of pseudo mixing these up. And then now all I had to do is when I'm reaching and grabbing in, I'm grabbing, for example, I know that the one that I just grabbed, since it's got that larger sort of sealed flap, I know that that is sort of the top. I know that the one that's in here is the purple one. So then what I did is, instead of showing the purple one, when I showed it to you, I covered that over with my fingers, and so then I just pulled it out and said, you know, this is our green envelope with our green paper. And then can go ahead, rip this open, and a nice thing to be able to do is then I flashed it a little bit here so you can kind of see what I'm doing, but so essentially this is what we want to get rid of. So then I tore off this, and I can just crumple it up and toss it off to the side. So now people are fully expecting this to be the green with the green paper inside. So now I can tear that out and slide the purple paper out and the envelope is empty. And you could even fully tear it all the way open if you want to show that it's completely empty on the inside. And then you could hand these items out to anybody who's watching. They can look at everything and there's nothing to find. And then I did the exact same thing just to show that the full transposition had taken place here with the other envelope is, and I didn't get that slid down quite far enough, pulling this out, showing, okay, this is our purple envelope. Let's go ahead, tear that sealed end open. Great. I just threw that off to the side, and then now they're expecting to see the purple, and out comes the green. So this is, and again, if you want to open everything up, now everything, there's nothing to find here. So I will, I just will drop in the chat here. And so for everybody, if you want to take a peek on the first one, that should have the link for everything. And I know somebody commented they saw the envelopes on the first one. I apologize that it is tricky to demonstrate this on Zoom. In real life, it is a piece of cake, I promise. But all that to be said, so I'm going to jump back to sharing my screen just so that we can talk a little bit more about, kind of how and why this works the way that it does. So I know I just dropped that link in the chat, but if you need it again or want to type it in, I know sometimes in Zoom the hyperlinks get a little crazy or a little temperamental. There is the link for you. And then, so there is that. And then let's get into kind of how this works, which is based a lot on our expectations. So one of the things that Juan Tamariz, who is one of our other kind of main magic theoreticians, something that he talks about often is looking at how we as magicians try to anticipate different things, which is people's visual assumptions, their psychological assumptions, and then trying to sort of preemptively negate explanations that people may have for how a magic effect might work. So first, with this particular effect, one of its real strong suits is the object familiarity aspect of it. I would venture to say most, if not all of us, probably have either a box of envelopes sitting in your house or even some that you get, included in junk mail or things like that. So most of us have, blank envelopes hanging around. I would venture to say most people have handled an empty blank envelope at some point in their lives, probably. It's probably maybe becoming less of a commonality. But right now, if you are of the age to be watching this Zoom, then probably. So most of us are very familiar with sort of how an envelope is put together, what it feels like, what we expect an envelope to do, what we expect it to function like, and what we normally use it for, and how we normally interact with it, and how we've seen other people interact with it. So those things are really important. The other part of it too is with this particular example, I'm placing, labels on an envelope. If we all place stamps on envelopes, return address labels on envelopes. This is a very sort of normal standard process of something that we have all done or seen done a million times. Another aspect that's important in this is sort of this Gestalt perception of the objects itself, which I'll jump to my next slide in a second here, but then we'll also talk about the movement component of this a little further on. So with this, the sort of color and grouping aspect of the Gestalt theory here is actually really important because there has been some studies shown that the babies actually sort things by color before we learn or are even used to hearing any sort of language associated with that. So this idea of color sorting is so hardwired into us that the idea that, for example, the green card is going in with the green labeled envelope, that's just so naturally, humanly intuitive. It's built into us. We're not naturally designed to think, oh, well, maybe there's actually a second way that this is labeled, and maybe it's grouped with some dissimilar concept. We're just not wired to think that way. So this is something that really relies on a lot of our intrinsic psychology and neuroscience that I think is really, really interesting. One of the other fun things that I always personally like to take a look at is what are people's sort of general assumptions and audience expectations. There's a wonderful psychology researcher named Dr. Anne-Marie Danick, who is based out of Germany. She was somewhat recently here in the US a couple of years ago, teaching for a little bit with U of I at Chicago, UIC, in their psychology department, because she looks at magic as a mechanism for problem solving and delving into sort of the aha moment of problem solving. And so she actually ran, it was one of her first experiments that was quite interesting, was based on showing a number of different participants 37 different magic effects on video, and then people had to type in how they thought they worked. And in doing that, it was really entertaining, the answers that came back. People inevitably said that there was something about the process they didn't quite follow, or almost always some people were like, something about the magician's sleeves, something about the table. And so there is, for now, I actually have it in a book here. It's actually going to be in some of the content and conversation coming out next week. It's Robert Houdin's Conjuring Secrets, where he talks about people being suspicious of magicians' sleeves back in the 1800s. So this is sort of a cultural trope and stereotype that's been around for a long time. So that's why I always perform with no sleeves, or no major sleeves. And similar things. So it's, as magicians, we look at, okay, what are the, these sort of assumptions that people may have, whether that are things that are sort of culturally stereotyped in, or those sort of implicit memories, biases, etc., that are helpful and we want to use, or some of these negative, negative kind of stereotypes, and then can dispel those things like sleeves, etc. So right now I'll delve a little bit into the content of what this could be, again, because I'm showing you the most basic version imaginable. So one of the things that I usually start with when I'm looking at a much more complicated effect is going, what is at the core of what this magic effect is conveying? What is sort of the core impossibility? And depending on essentially what types of magic literature you read, it will be, people usually cite anywhere between 11 to 21 different categories of types of magic effects. And here I listed out a few that you can take a peek at that are, sort of the ones that people in the public are most familiar with, such as an appearance, vanish, transformation, things like that. So for today, I think it's pretty safe to say that this particular effect pretty squarely falls into the category of being a transformation, although it could also be, has potential to be within a category of a sympathetic reaction, which I'll explain further a little bit later on. Then, at least for me, then I often look at, okay, what is my relationship to the effect itself that I'm presenting? There's a German magician named Topaz who talks about the relationship of the magician to the magic that one is presenting, and sort of analogous to a crime scene, and having one of three roles, which is killer, a victim, or witness. The killer is what we're most familiar with in terms of sort of general Western pop culture, where the magician is sort of perpetrating or causing the effect. We think of this especially with a lot of, very like flashy magic, a lot of stage magic where it's, a lot of bravado and a lot of like, hey, look at, I did this thing that is so cool, I caused this thing to happen. That's a lot of what we see, as opposed to things like this more sort of victim mentality, which is what we typically see more often in comedy, where things sort of are maybe spiraling out of control. Something magical is happening and you don't know why, and maybe you're trying to figure out how to stop it. And then the one that is most interesting to me, probably because we see it the least often, which is sort of the witness role, where you have sort of observed something and you're just standing alongside it and sort of reporting on what you saw. Um, so for me, I often, those are sort of my two starting places, is go when I personally am working on a new effect, is going, what is sort of the core and possibility at the center of the magic effect that's happening, and then what is my relationship to said impossible effect. That's sort of the basic framework for where then I start to then look at how to build a narrative, any sort of variations, aesthetics, etc. from there. So with this, there's a lot of variations that could happen with this particular effect, even as something really simple. I think the first one that popped to mind for me would be, gift cards, and doing, one gift card magically, the gift cards magically transform from one to another. Um, Obviously, you could do this within, with also with credit cards, things in like RFID covers, doing it with, birthday cards, holiday cards, within envelopes, those sorts of things. Any object that, you would normally have in an envelope with something like that. But then the same principle could be applied to objects as well. So in theory, you could also have, an object in a small bag and label, like a small gift bag or something, and then have the objects, have it seem like the objects within, some small gift bags changed places. So again, once you start to look at what is seemingly a very, very, very simple magic effect in terms of its mechanism, going, okay, well, this could actually be used to create some really impossible seeming things if it's sort of dovetailed out in some interesting ways, using a lot of different materials, different narratives. I think you can start to see how very quickly this can get built out into something far more compelling. So in a minute, we'll open up the chat. If anybody has, you can hang tight on doing this for now, but if anybody has ideas for variations that you think would be fun or cool ideas, definitely we are all here to have fun with this together today. So if you have any you want to share, definitely feel free to drop those in the chat in a minute. So again, I'm just kind of recapping that in what I was saying a moment ago about, kind of linking that intrinsic possibility, your relationship to it, and then we start to get into how to actually craft a message and a narrative that then makes this compelling. So it's not just pieces of paper and envelopes, which, let's be honest, nobody has any deep meaningful relationship with, unless perhaps you are, maybe you work in a real life Dunder Mifflin and you work in a paper supplier, and then this actually is extremely relevant. But that's a very small portion of people. So then we get into sort of how to make this suit you the best and be most relevant to you. Obviously, for many people watching this, your presentations for doing, if you were to present any magic facts in your own life, are probably relatively casual. Things for family, friends, things like that, where then having a very formalized script and rehearsed manner is probably a bit much. So I think it's always always trying to be mindful of that as you are, though, trying to come up with something that does actually fit the tone and the setting. But then again, also circling back within this variation idea, what then are the prompts, the setting, the ways to customize this to then suit your particular motivation for doing an effect. So, let's say, for example, you're doing it, with the gift cards. And, I, for example, have had people give me gift cards with, I drink a lot of coffee. I used to travel a lot. Pre-quarantine was splitting my time between Chicago and New York. And I've had, family members give me, like national, chain, Starbucks and pizza and stuff, gift cards, saying, okay, we know there's ones in every airport. That makes sense for you, as opposed to, also giving me plans for places that are hyper local and saying, this is one, this coffee shop you go to on your block. So that's something that is very personal to me, where I could talk about, having those two gift cards, having those, I could talk about, placing, going out of town, placing the wrong gift card in my bag, and magically it changes from, the one that was on my block to boom, now it's magically Starbucks and I can use it in the airport, kind of thing. So again, there's so many different things to kind of make it, about stories that have unfolded in your real life, where then you are using the materials that fit, the context that fits, the stories, your personality, and what actually makes it all make sense to tell a story that actually suits you in a setting that makes sense. So we will jump back open on the chat here. Feel free to drop any of those ideas within the chat. I see some amazing ideas here coming. Yeah, I think that the $1 to $1,000 idea is fantastic. Obviously, like, it's really interesting because that actually is an effect that is long existed within magic, is changing one form of currency to another, the amount of the currency. So that, what's interesting is, that's a well-established effect within magic. So this could be a mechanism by which to do that. So say, for example, that could even be a fun way to give a gift, perhaps to somebody in your family. Maybe you were placing, a $1 bill and a $20 bill in two envelopes, and then, they think you're handing them the one with the, the $1 bill or something, and then you tear it open, you've actually given them $20. I don't know, there's so many fun ways to be, to use this sort of thing that I think is really, really fun. So, so sort of our last section here, I think there's a lot within these processes here that can teach us how to innovate solutions for other things in our world. So let's take a peek at how this might work. And also, just a heads up for everybody, we will be moving to the Q&A shortly. So we do encourage you to actually use the Q&A button, which, depending on if you have your navigation bar at the top or the bottom, is either like right here or right here. Use that Q&A button. But we do also have that poll up on how many people are watching in your household. So jumping back though to how to further implement these ideas within other aspects of our lives, I think this idea of how magic is using sometimes very elegant solutions can help us to just act as sort of a jump starter within the brain to think about, okay, if I had to create something that seemed totally impossible, but I can only use existing techniques or existing materials, how would I do that? Because that's what we do all the time. I think also we oftentimes kind of think about, okay, well, is something genuinely impossible to do, or is it just really improbable? Or is it something that's just extremely difficult? What are kind of those levels of quote unquote impossibility and impossible situations? Are there unexpected forms or ways to address this concept? And then how do we use content, messaging, materials to bolster that form? So for example, with the things that we've just gone through, sort of in some more real life applications of this. So within the most base version of this envelope and label scenario, let's say that you are a product designer. You know, maybe people have automatic assumptions about a certain material that you're using. You know, maybe you're designing phone cases and people have, you know, very specific connotation about, you know, using, you know, kind of silicone and rubber type, you know, rubber type cases. What are other materials that could potentially be used to make a phone case that are just totally out of the box? I don't know what those things are, but it's just an interesting way to think about it. Or maybe you work in HR. What are other systems or processes or experiences that maybe people have a long-standing experience with otherwise that then could be sort of implemented in what you do? What I mean by that is a lot of times I feel like as a magician, I pull from, you know, technology, and not technology in its colloquial sense, but sort of technologies in other industries, and processes and ideas in other industries, and then we sort of either retrofit them or use them within magic. So, you know, for example, if you're in, you know, maybe HR and you're going, okay, well, you know, people are really familiar with, you know, Postmates and people are using that a lot. Is there a way to implement, you know, different procedures in, you know, what I do? You know, there's all of these just different angles for how to look at what people are familiar with and how to totally repurpose that. Um, Again, sort of with the color sorting and various Gestalt grouping and sort of holistic perception ideas, you know, what are ways in which, you know, an item, and by that I mean materials, products, experiences, processes, you know, what are the thing that you're working on? How can, maybe there's some way to group that or pair that or collaborate with somebody in a really unexpected way. Um, and then, you know, and just the idea of transforming one thing to another with a lot of these, you know, magic effects, essentially, in sort of the little list that I gave of the appearance, vanish, transformation, transposition, you know, these sort of surprising and delightful and unexpected ways of thinking. What are ways that maybe even some of those structural ideas could be used to create an idea or a product or an experience, um, or, you know, to solve a company issue? And then also thinking about how the form and the content and the messaging work together to sort of bolster what's actually at the core of what you're doing. If you're, you know, designing an app, maybe, you know, it's figuring out how to have the narrative actually support the technology. And then finally, you know, with thinking about the use of tearing open envelopes, all these sort of familiar things that people have expected assumptions with, and then also sort of those socialized sort of stereotypes with, how do we use both of those things together to then create sort of the narratives and experiences that we want people to have, in terms of taking those those assumptions and expectations, and then sort of preemptively subvert them, which I think is something that magic is really, really fabulous about, and doing. And I think as a magician, I think sometimes the solutions within magic, again, are just so beautiful and elegant. Like, this on its core is just adding an extra sticker, but then it's all the psychology and nuance and narrative of then creating something where then the end result is something totally impossible seeming to happen. So that pretty much wraps up my portion for today. So please, if you are not already, definitely keep in touch with me. I'm Jeanette Andrews. You can find me on Instagram at Jeanette Andrews Magic. We will be answering your questions for a few minutes here. I know we started a couple minutes after the fact, so I'm fine to stick around, and I know we have a number of questions. So I'll be answering your questions. If you think of anything after the fact, feel free to drop me an email. I'm at info@JeanetteAndrews.com. So with that being said, we will jump back. I know we have our poll results going here, which is great. And then I will toss it back. I see we have a couple of questions in our. These actually are kind of the couple here. is our it's almost kind of one and the same, which I think is a good note for us to end on. Beth asked, you said you can ethically teach certain things, and please explain the ethics of magic. And then, and I am hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Shlomet, said, will you please tell us how the first card trick is done, or is that my secret? It's perfect because those questions work in tandem. So the first two effects, and I apologize if I did not state this clearly enough, I would not be teaching those. Those are things that are both part of my professional repertoire, which also have entailed years of practice. And so for me, obviously, given that those kind of fall more under the category of trade secrets. So, if anybody were to get really sort of nitty gritty and legal here, there's really a progression of sort of how knowledge and technical information within magic is ascertained. So, the best analogy that I can come up with is a little bit kind of, and again, I haven't experienced this, so I'm going off of what people tell me, but is kind of based on music lessons. So if which is what I would need to be doing right now, if I said, hey, I really want to go and learn to play the piano, I would never be able to go to a piano teacher and be like, I've never played the piano before in my life, but I fully expect to sit down and for you to teach me how to play, Rhapsody in Blue with one hand, or something like that. Is just crazy. And so, like, I know that I would have to go. They're going to teach me scales. I'm going to have to practice that a million times. Then I'm probably going to learn Mary Had a Little Lamb or something. And, and then I have to practice that a million times and then do something a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And then continually go back to that person and verify that I did in fact actually practice what they taught me. I took their advice seriously. I put the time and effort in, and then by you sort of ongoingly building that knowledge and that trust with a teacher, then it's like, okay, well, now I see that you're ready for something more difficult. Okay, now I see that you understand that. So that's very much how magic works, is within a professional realm anyway, is, people sort of see, okay, you worked on this and you learned this, so now you kind of seem ready for this. So I went through that through a much more sort of formal, magic teacher and mentorship relationship. However, the first magic that I did was from Magic Kit, which I learned, and then was all from magic books from the library. That was the first magic that I learned. And I grew up in Wheaton, and I tore through, and my parents very kindly read to me every single book on magic that our library had at the time. So by then building, I'd gone through and done all of that and had practiced all of this. And so by the time that then we found a magic teacher for me to take lessons from, he could see, okay, she already kind of learned things from this point and now is kind of at a dead end. So now I can kind of show her this. And then it's oftentimes building off of things like that. So, for me, one of the things that I love is most magic that I learn is still from person to person and in books. And when I say books, I mean things that are done in extremely limited prints that are only known about to pretty established magicians. Like nothing anybody would ever find if you're Googling magic books. No way. And stuff that's, never been digitized, probably never will be. Maybe they print 200 copies, sort of thing. So because of that, a lot of the more sort of cultivated and closely guarded secrets really then are only shared within people who are really implementing them professionally or in more sort of academic purposes. And when I say academic, I don't mean purely within the realm of formal academia. I mean also just for personal study. We have a lot of amazing people who contribute to magic extensively as innovators, where maybe they don't perform as much or they don't perform professionally, but they're inventors of magic or they're writers or magic historians. So a lot of people along that line. So lots and lots of amazing, kind of formal and informal magic scholars. So that's sort of where that lies. So for example, within people where you have worked for oftentimes decades to get that level of trust, and knowledge based for people to share that information with you, that also where people's livelihoods are depending on it, quite often, it is really considered kind of trade secret and not ethical to reveal, as opposed to, and that's kind of how I'll start to wrap up some of our time, as opposed to some of the very simple effects that are in books that are in the library that are widely accessible to people, which granted, I have seen some kind of shockingly amazing things in books in the library, I will say, where I'm kind of like, oh, I can't believe this is in here. But there's a lot that is really good, and obviously we want people to be interested in magic. We want people to learn about it. So there is that, but there also does have to be a progression. There also has to be that progression so people don't get frustrated, because I certainly know that if I started learning piano and I went to a piano teacher and they started off the bat by teaching me something incredibly technically difficult and then expected me just like, here's the first thing you're learning, that's not going to fly. I'm going to get so frustrated so fast and be like, forget it, I'm out. So there is also that way of building a progression, as with anything that has some sort of technical skill, so that you're building on a sequence of skills. So that's a lot of it too. The ethics of magic is a very complicated, very nuanced discussion, but hopefully, at least my 6-minute summary hopefully at least gives you a little bit of insight. So I think that was all of our questions that popped up. I think we got questions answered. On that note, I just want to thank everybody so much for coming, for spending this incredibly warm, at least if you're watching from Chicago, it is a blazer, a Sunday afternoon here with me, and with AHML. I've been talking for so long, I'm getting it all out. But I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you so much to Vesran and Jennifer for hosting with us. Like they both said, I do have a whole one whole week left of my artist in residence position with the library. So we have a bunch of amazing programs coming up with you. And so I really hope you'll join me Tuesday night on Instagram Live for my Meet the Artist, where I'll be answering more of your questions. If you want to have an overflow and continue just to discuss this sort of ethics of magic question, I'm happy to continue that conversation oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Ben just posted, I have library holds on half the reading list. Yes, there's a really great, I was very excited to see that in the library's collection, you have a couple of books by one of my favorite, probably my favorite magic book author for kind of like the general public, that is, where you can find his books on Amazon, or your local independent bookseller who's not Amazon, and in libraries, which is Nicholas Einhorn, who the books are really simple to follow. At a first glance, it may almost look like they're written for younger audiences, but trust me, there is killer stuff in them. So those Nicholas Einhorn books, check them out. But yes, so So anyway, definitely so excited. Please join me on Tuesday for the Meet the Artist Live on Instagram Live. And I just, again, want to thank Jennifer and Vezram for being so amazing to work with. And thank you so much, all of you, for attending today.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you everybody who was here. It was great to see everybody in your participant list, of course, by name only, but we love that you participated with us again today and hope that you'll be here for the rest of the events this week. So thank you, Jeanette, for everything.
Thank you so much, folks, for being here. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.